read your script. So Meredith, you can read your script now.
Just finding it. The Board of Direct Entry Midwifery will now exit executive session and reconvene open session at 9:37 a.m. No final decisions were made and no votes were taken in executive session. The public phone line has been unmuted and representatives of the media may once again report all board discussions and actions. All right.
We all switched over.
Yep.
All right. This is Kelsey Fisher, and I move that in case number 21-10285, that the board not open an investigation due to lack of jurisdiction.
This is Wendy Smith, and I second.
Motion has been made, so I'll take a vote. We'll take a vote. Beth Iva.
Aye.
Wendy Smith.
Aye.
Christine Morales.
Aye.
Kelsey Fisher.
Aye.
Lynette Pettibone.
Aye.
Meredith Mance.
Aye.
Meredith Fine. Aye. All right, what's the next one, Kelsey?
Next one, I move that in case number 21-10297, that the board not open an investigation.
This is Wendy.
This is Sylvie. Hold on. This is Sylvie. Kelsey, if you want, you can, since they're all exactly the same, you can read off all the case numbers
okay.
instead of just one at a time.
Sure. They were written down differently on my list, but they are actually all the same. So this is Kelsey, and I move that in cases number 21-10297, case number 21-10287, and case number 21-10288, that the board not open investigations.
This is Wendy Smith, and I second.
Okay, let's take a vote. Beth Iva.
Aye.
Wendy Smith.
Aye.
Christine Morales.
Aye.
Kelsey Fisher.
Aye.
Lynette Pettibone.
Aye.
Meredith Mance.
Aye.
And Meredith Klein. Aye. So our last item is other board business.
This is Kelsey, and there's a few things that I would like to talk about. One is just to reiterate what we talked about last meeting that I think, I don't know, did the FAQ go out on how the board considers growth restriction to be an abnormal fetal surveillance result? I know we had talked about that happening, but I don't remember seeing it happen yet. That did go out. Okay. And then in addition to that clarification, I think that it would be great for us to put it in our parking lot for the next rules revision to re-add growth restriction, whatever the term of the day is at that point, as an indication for transfer. So just to put in our rules parking lot. And then another rules parking lot thing that I would like to add is something that I'm hearing from other midwives is that there's confusion about how we've written the peer review requirements. In particular, this part about your peer review must happen with an entity. I know that we went kind of around and around with that because we didn't want it limited to just one organization, but we wanted to make sure that it was happening with an organization, and I think that people just don't understand. There's just a lot of confusion in the community. So my the idea would be that the entities would register with the board. So change the language to be like board approved entities, and then we could have like a list on the board website.
And Kelsey, by board, I'm sorry, by entity, you mean, because I had always thought.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Beth.
I had always thought peer review was like just between individuals, like the midwife.
Yes. Yeah, so we have in our in the rules section that we have about peer review, it defines peer review as having to be like at least this many midwives that are community birth providers, and they have to not all be in the same practice. But we have an additional requirement that at least one of the peer reviews has to be with an entity, and then we have some definitions about what consists of that entity. Like they have to have some scope over reviewing cases. They have to have at least 5 LDM members. I'm not recalling the other specifications off the top of my head, but our kind of understanding, or my recollection of our understanding when we were writing the rule, was that Oregon Midwifery Council would definitely qualify because they have a quality improvement program and they have structure around peer review and chart review and case review, all of that. But we didn't feel like we could force people to go to just that one organization. So we wrote this rule to allow for other organizations to qualify. But it seems like people are not understanding, or there's just a lot of confusion around what entity means. So that was kind of my idea, was that we could alter that to be board approved entities and then have a list.
And do you have some suggestions about what would be on that list? Like the Oregon Midwifery Council would be one, but
yeah, I think that the way we could do it is just we could have the entities apply, and then we would approve them or not, based on their documentation of having at least 5 midwife members. And it looks like Sandy might have something to say.
So I get this question, a couple times a month. And a couple things that, and I just give them the list, needs to be an entity that consists of 5 LDMs. That could be you 5 if you wanted it to be. An entity through which the peer review occurs must be an entity that reviews quality professional midwifery care. That's, I'm assuming, any midwife. Peer review must be conducted with at least 2 other midwives, which are outside of the practice. That's standard. And the peer review must be conducted with providers who perform community births. So I just tell them that, and then it becomes clear to them. The other thing that I've heard is if we were approving these, it could become weird when you start involving the state or the board in any type of peer review, even though you're not reviewing it, but you'd be approving each entity. So it's really pretty clear, and once I explain it to people, they understand it. But we could certainly have the board approve that.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people are not asking you about it, maybe. I just know that there's still a lot of confusion in the community. And I remember specifically one of the things that we were trying to get at in the way that we wrote the rule was ideally that there would be a quality improvement program associated with the entity. But the definitions of quality improvement program, when we looked it up, were really circular and unclear. And so we weren't able to include that.
Well, they weren't unclear. They're very specific. They were specific that it was an entity, like an association. I think it actually listed professional organization, and then it was limiting to where somebody, say, if I recall the conversation, in, say, Eastern Oregon, and they got 5 midwives together who did community birth and met all 4 standards, that would be acceptable peer review. And that's kind of why we circled around really defining more specificity around entity. But again, the board can approve it, but you're going to have to make some clearer guidelines. Otherwise, it's because today it's kind of a free for all. That's just is what it is. So, but you'll have you have to define it more specifically Otherwise, you're just approving things to just approve them, but with no parameters really, other than the 4 you currently
Right.
have.
So as it is now, people just say that they did at least one of the peer reviews is with 5, or one of the peer reviews meets those requirements. Like, you don't have to have some kind of actual official entity. I mean, my recollection was part of the inspiration for it was so that you're doing peer review outside your practice, not just with the 2 midwives you work with at your birth center, and that you just inherently get a broader perspective from
Yeah.
that.
I mean, that's what's implied.
So that's a separate requirement. So like the definition of peer review is that it's not midwives all in the same practice. So that is part of the definition of peer review. Outside of this, one of your peer reviews has to be with an entity.
And at least 2 have to be outside your practice of the 5.
Right. Well, but the 5 is a different thing. So 5 was just the number of members that the entity had to have at a minimum, was 5 licensed direct entry midwife members. And but a peer review is at least 3 midwives who are, and they have to be from more than one practice. So I think that's like part of the confusion is what are the entity requirements versus what makes something a peer review. I don't know. It sounds like people are currently interpreting it as a free-for-all, which is kind of how it was written, but that wasn't at least my intent when we were writing the rule. So I just wanted to have a conversation about it. And
I'll
maybe
add
put
to
it,
the list.
yeah, our parking lot list. I don't know if anyone has language ideas or timeline desires for when we open the rules back up again.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like it needs clarification if Sammy's getting, like, what'd you say, a couple calls a week?
A month.
A month?
A month, emails, calls.
Yeah.
Is this something that could be discussed within the OMC and brought back to us, or? Because, I mean, I think part of it is, you can only be so prescriptive, as we said, right? But if people want us to be prescriptive, then sure, whatever.
I remember the commentary from OMC being like not wanting the rule to be written the way that we wrote it. They wanted it to be clearer, and less of a free for all.
Could that be something that you come back and then discuss? Because I actually feel like for this whole fetal growth restriction thing, that we need to reopen the rules and correct that.
Yeah.
So.
I could bring a rule schedule back to your January meeting. If that's something Sylvie is okay with.
Yeah, this is Sylvie. We've got a huge, Sammy is involved in a huge project with cosmetology and advanced aesthetics at the moment. But if your goal is to open just the rule related to the fetal growth restriction stuff and not all of your rules, then it will be much easier for Sammy to be able to get that into her schedule. If you guys plan to do a whole rule review, that's something that's going to take some time. So if you're focused on one little thing, I think Sammy can work that into her schedule.
I think for me, it might depend a little bit on what else is in our parking lot. And if we have any ideas about how we could further clarify the intent and language around peer review entities.
So we can't
Do you
make any.
feel like sorry.
Oh,
do
go
you
ahead.
feel like the fetal growth restriction, like that's more pressing, and so we just do that now and then save the other stuff for maybe later?
Yeah, I think that's an option.
I mean, it does seem more pressing since we keep seeing it come up in the cases that we're seeing.
Okay, so I have an idea. So you guys don't meet next month. You don't meet till January something or other. And at that, so between now and then, Sammy can get a list of all of your items that are on your parking lot. And then at your January meeting, she can also, give you like maybe a rough draft depending on how you decide at the January meeting. But it needs to be on the agenda so that public knows what we're talking about and what we're discussing. So if we get it on the agenda, we can talk about the rules, issues with the rules, and then you guys can at that time decide what you want to move forward with, what's more important. You can kind of prioritize them, whatever, but the public really needs to know that all that stuff is occurring so they can listen, and it's not on the agenda now. So is everybody comfortable with January? We'll make sure that there's a bullet point on there. Sammy will get whatever documents she can together so that you have your list of items, and then the public will really know that we're going to open this discussion again.
Sounds reasonable.
That's good.
Okay.
Does that sound reasonable to you, Sammy?
Yes. I was typing. And so it isn't like my clinking fingers.
Since we're talking about that, does anyone have anything else on their rules wish list or personal parking lot to add?
Yes. Well, this is a bigger issue since I know we have determined this would require a statute change, but I know it's on our parking lot and would like to revisit the potential of terbutaline in our formulary. But I know that's a much bigger process than just opening the rules.
We aren't responsible for the statute. Like, we don't have jurisdiction over the statute. So essentially, we cannot do anything about that as a board.
Got it.
We are like beholden to the statutes, but we don't get to make.
So it has to be like done outside of the board.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
That was like the clarification that I was looking for and how this process looks like. And I guess just a quick background as to why I'm bringing that up right now is, and Wendy, you might be able to speak to this a little bit better since you're in Portland and I am not. But in McMinnville here, the hospital, our only private OB practice is closing this month forever. And McMinnville Hospital is on divert. Willamette Valley Medical Center is on permanent divert for the foreseeable future. And then I know there have been some concerns that have been brought to me about wait times for ambulances and transfers in Portland. And so that's what kind of inspired this to be on the front of my mind in terms of just another layer of safety during these potentially longer transfers than what we initially anticipated as practitioners.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, and I understand your concerns. And I also want terbutaline on our formulary. And
wait a minute, what? Please explain your rationale for terbutaline and the need for terbutaline.
Just because I guess background, I had access to it when I practiced as a licensed midwife in Texas. And it's something, we very, very rarely use. But knowing that transfers are taking longer than they did in the past at the moment because of staffing concerns and lots of hospitals being on divert more so than they have been in the past, I was thinking it would add an extra layer of safety in an emergency situation.
What's safety? I'm not sure what you're saying because there's no evidence that terbutaline actually works. And so what are you hoping to gain?
And that's, I think, important stuff for us to talk about. For me, we had it as an option to use if we had an emergency transfer and wanted to try to stop contractions in that process.
It doesn't stop labor. It does not stop labor. So why would you use a medication that causes horrible symptoms, has risk, and doesn't do anything?
Well, and that's the discussion we can have then. I'm not trying to have this debate about terbutaline.
Okay,
I was just explaining my background and why that was something that came up for me.
All right. I understand, but this is not a medication that I would ever, or any, I think, provider with the literature behind them would ever recommend use. And it's certainly not a safety level. If anything, it's increasing risk using it in a situation where it doesn't belong. So I don't think you're going to get agreement from the clinical community. It's not you. I have not used terbutaline in probably 9 years.
So,
Well, and Wendy, I think that some of the difference of the context would be that, like, we would use TERB if there's like a cord prolapse and there's like a significant time delay between.
I see. Okay. I
Yeah,
understand.
exactly. Like we're not just using
Okay.
it to stop
I
contractions. It would
understand.
be
No, thank you for
emergency
clarifying that.
only.
Yeah,
Yeah,
hear
I'm
what
sorry
you're
that that
saying.
wasn't clear.
No,
Yeah,
no,
that's
it wasn't
definitely
clear
the
in my
only
head.
context that I'm talking about is
thinking-
emergency.
Yeah, I was thinking what you were saying. That's fine. You're right. That's an important.
Or like, you know, our
You're-
34-weeker who's 3 hours from a hospital, you know.
Right.
Well, that's what I thought you were saying is for preterm, but
Oh, no.
okay.
No.
No, that's fine.
No, I mean like in like an emergency EMS transfer of
Okay.
trying one more layer of protection of
Okay.
stopping those contractions on your
Fair
way.
enough. Yes. No. I'm sorry. Thank you. And I certainly understand what you're saying now. Thank you for clarifying it.
and so what you're saying, Meredith, is there's a delay on the end of, sometimes there's a delay even getting an ambulance to you. And then depending on where you are getting the hospital may or may not be accepting, you know, I mean, hopefully this will not be the case
Forever, right?
you know,
It seems
COVID,
temporary,
yeah, but it's definitely seems to be the case now.
Yeah, I mean, there's cases now where you are getting a busy signal from 911 for extended periods of time. So yeah, I think that, you know, the state of the world might influence our decisions.
Are you talking about this with your clients? I mean, are you talking
Yeah.
about the risk of delay?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And are you considering it when you're considering transfer as well? Yeah. Is this
I
something
do. I consider
Absolutely.
location and hospital access, and we have that conversation specifically as part of the transfer informed consent agreement and considering risk assessment for the client too.
Is this something that the OMC is making, you know, pretty well known?
Yeah,
Yes.
I would say like I know there are
I-
Portland area emails going out. I'm not sure about statewide, but it's definitely something that's being talked about, I think.
Okay. Thank you. And sorry about the terbutaline. Yes, I was thinking in a
Sorry,
totally
I wasn't
different
clear.
I just was thinking about a totally different context.
Yeah, which wasn't even
if-
on my radar, which is why I didn't think it was. So I was like, wait, what?
I do, Meredith, think that if we're going to talk about a meds wish list, that's something that we might be able to add based on our statute is tranexamic acid. And I know, I think Lynette specifically has talked about that. So that's a med that is in our parking lot that we might be able to incorporate.
That feels like a reasonable layer of protection in this situation as well. Since hemorrhages are so time sensitive, I think having another layer, another tool to use while we wait for
What was
transfer
it?
would be helpful.
What was it? I think you guys have a parking lot I may not have.
Yeah, so
Tranexamic
Sammy, the
acid.
medication, yeah, tranexamic acid, it's also sometimes abbreviated TXA. Anyone else with rules wish lists?
Not a rules wish list, but I would just go back to sort of my request that maybe we somehow create some sort of more user-friendly summary sheet of administrative rules. I don't know. I mean, I know we have that PDF kind of thing that is supposed to be easier to read, but I still think it's hard to read and to get at the meat of what the scope of practice is. I don't know how you do that. I don't. I mean, I don't have the time to do it. I think I do know how to do it, but I also don't have the time to do it. So I don't know how that gets done.
I will say that when I Google Community Midwife Oregon rules, that our rules, the PDF, is the first thing that pops up. So that's nice, at least. Maybe that could be like a frequently asked question of just some of the like hot topic issues of whether this is LDM scope or not. Like, could we just have an FAQ that's like breaches, VBAC, twins, post dates? Do we have medication?
And
Can we do labs?
meant specifically for like other providers in the community, or just that's on the website accessible?
I think something specifically for other providers.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'm not sure that it would help, how much it would help. I don't know how much friction there is between someone wanting to know what the rules are and being able to find them.
So are we just going to put that on our list for January to talk more about, or make some kind of movement?
I think that it's something that we could have a more in-depth conversation about, of whether it's an issue that we want to address, and if so, how to address it.
Okay.
Yeah, my goal is that Sammy creates a document that has all your ideas in it, so that when we meet in January, the public knows what you're going to be discussing, so that they can listen to you talk about whether or not to do a scope of practice Q&A. They can listen to you talk about, you know, some medications that you want added to the list. So as long as that stuff is noticed, so that the public can understand. So Sammy's making notes, which is why she made the little comment about muting herself from the typing thing. So she'll draft up something so that it's part of the agenda, so that the public knows, and we'll get into lots of depth about it in January.
Perfect. That's what I was going to ask, if we could have a breakdown of the topics prior to the meeting instead of just other board business, so that we could come more prepared too.
Right, and the public needs to be prepared, and so that's why we need it to be specific. So, and if there's something else, even you, Kelsey, if there's something you think of between now and then, email it to Sammy. She can add it to the list. Whether you guys move forward or not, you'll have that discussion, but at least then the public knows what all the things you're going to talk about.
Great, thank you, Sylvie.
Of course.
What type of things would you want to have a special FAQ on? I heard breach, twins.
Well, I think it's not so much that we want individual ones on all of those, but just, I think what Wendy was saying is some kind of like quick reference to community midwife scope of practice.
Yeah, so Sammy, it's more of like a doctor not knowing what midwives can do. You know, and with the way everything's going on with COVID and the hospitals and the mandatory vaccines, people moving, you're going to have doctors coming to Oregon from another state who have no idea what midwives in Oregon can or can't do. And we're going to, you know, and being able to do a quick one pager, you know, in Oregon, licensed direct and trained midwives can do, and just but very simple, like a, you know, and then obviously in it say, you know, you know, in-depth understanding, you're welcome to contact Sammy, or here's a link to the rules, you know, but just a quick, so that people are who may not be familiar with Oregon are quickly can see that, yes, it's okay that a midwife does A, B, and C.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the goal, Sammy.
Okay, so I'll just bring on the agenda, I'll just put quick reference tool, and then you guys can tell me what you want on there.
Right.
What specific items you want.
Right.
This is Lynette.
I mean, maybe everyone can take a look at the rule. I'll definitely take a look at the rules and kind of jot down what I think are the big key items that people don't understand. Because I can tell you people don't understand this.
Yes. Lynette, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that we have one for Washington State that I could provide as an example that we give to the hospitals when we integrate them into our smooth transitions program.
Oh, awesome. Will you please email that to Sammy?
Yes.
Or the link if you don't, whatever. Yeah, just so Sammy has it. She can put it part of the materials too.
This is Kelsey, and I just remembered that the Oregon Perinatal Collaborative had a task force about transfer and like integrating care, and there might be something already as part of their toolkit.
I don't think so, Kelsey.
It's not there, Wendy.
Yeah, I'm on that committee, and I don't think there is something like that. I can ask Silka, and I can look, but I don't think so.
Okay.
Anything else?
Next meeting is Kelsey's first meeting as the chair, and I just wanted to give her an appreciation for taking that over. That really just didn't end up suiting me, and I look forward to being a regular member again. So I really
thank you for all your work as chair, Meredith. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Are we finished? The Board of Direct Entry Midwifery meeting is adjourned at 10:09 a.m.
Thank you.